So Vybz Kartel is the guy a casual listener will be bumping to when a dancehall classic like Clark's drops at the barbecue. And he's the guy the fans stuck by, consuming all the music he dropped over the past 13 years from prison. Today on the podcast, why many people are celebrating the release of Vybz Kartel. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Alamin Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. All right, so let's kick it off right here. That's Summertime from Vybz Kartel, who is one of Jamaican dancehall's most innovative but also controversial artists, okay? And if you don't know him, just think of him like Bruce Springsteen to rock and roll, okay? He's changing the way dancehall has reached across the world. But last week, Vybz Kartel, he walked away a free man after serving 13 years of a life sentence for a murder he always denied committing. His court case was overturned due to a technicality, and now people are celebrating from Jamaica to Canada. So the group chat is here. Walshy Fire, Dalton, Higgins, and Danae Peart. Hi, y'all.
Hi.
Hey.
All right, look, this is not going to be an easy conversation. I mean, we're discussing stuff that's very graphic and violent and not going to be easy to hear. So the first thing I have to say to y'all is thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. Walshy, I'm going to start with you. Before we get into the case and Vybz Kartel's release, I want to talk about him as an artist. This is someone you got to work with personally as a part of Major Lazer, okay? And you've been in the dancehall scene for a long time as a DJ. So talk to me about what Vybz Kartel represents to you as a musician, as a representative of dancehall.
Vybz Kartel is just a part of the bigger puzzle. There's so many artists that have paved the way for Vybz Kartel, and he carried the torch. And when was incarcerated, was missed, and so. He's a big piece of that lineage into what dancehall is today, and is a big part of why a lot of people aren't really into dancehall right now globally, and that's because he was incarcerated. He was a very impactful and very important person, bringing the old style and the old network and connections, to the young artists. And I'm sure the industry and the business missed him. And, I had a great time working with him, and I really appreciate every song that we've done together and every interview and every time we've linked up, and great times.
Amazing. Well, I mean, Dalton, can you actually lay out for us? We found out that last week Vybz Kartel was released after serving 13 years in prison. Can you lay out the case for us and how it is that we got here?
Yeah, totally. I mean, essentially, Vybz Kartel, he was jailed back in 2014 for the murder of, one of his close accomplices, Clive Lizard Williams in Jamaica. And what's interesting with his case is, he's always maintained his innocence. And, the case essentially centered around the deceased, Clive Williams, not returning back some of Vybz Kartel's, unlicensed firearms, right? And and then he was attacked, and he's essentially never been seen alive again, right? The house where this attack happened was burned down days later, and Clive Williams's body has never been found. Now, there's some pretty gruesome, gratuitous incidences of ideas around violence, a text message was allegedly found on Vybz Kartel's phone that alluded to him and his crew chopping Williams's remains up into minced meat, quote unquote. And, Kartel's defense team, they'd been appealing the conviction for years now. And it's only recently in March that the conviction was overturned by UK judges. And, the case itself was a bit of a comedy of errors, and in the end, it was tossed out due to juror misconduct, right? The original trial itself back in 2014, it dragged on for 65 days, and it stands as the longest trial in Jamaica's history. Okay. And now we're here.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because it's like the decision to throw out the case felt more of a decision based on protecting procedure and kind of the validity of the justice system rather than anything to do with this particular case, right? Because the option was there for the Jamaican courts to retrial, to go back to trial, but then they just decided not to do that because of Vybz Kartel's health reasons, as I understand.
Yeah, that's definitely one part of it. I mean, if you saw the physical condition he looked like when he came out, clearly they say apparently he has a Graves' disease, but he looks in very rough shape physically, mentally, socially, and otherwise. So I think that did play a part.
Yeah, Danae, I think you were agreeing and disagreeing on some of what I was said there. So please jump in that, and also just talk to me about the reaction in Jamaica to all of this.
So the reaction to Jamaica, I made sure to watch every vlogger I could find when that verdict came down and the subsequent hours out of it. And it was euphoria for the most part. It was, their world boss is free. It was elation. It was all of the things. But, obviously I have different interpretations of what vibes really means in the Jamaican and outside of the Jamaican context. But, I was happy to see Jamaicans at home and abroad. They were in sync in terms of, watching this news and reacting to it. And obviously in his area where he's from in Waterford, aka Gaza, it was euphoria again when he got home. So it was definitely excitement. For me, however, like I like to contextualize Vybz. I actually think Vybz Kartel is very interesting as a character. In terms of explaining Jamaican dancehall culture and explaining Jamaicans. And so there are two layers that come across to me. One is, he's iconic dancehall artist. They've missed him. He actually changed the trajectory of dancehall, if we're to be honest, in terms of the speed with which he writes and produces content, and also how he made dancehall artists know that you can commodify dancehall in a way you can like make money off the brand and all of that. So that he was really good at, and people missed like all of that impact. And then there's the polarizing Vybz Kartel, the socio-political conversation about what does he represent when he comes out now. Is he going to go in a kind of political direction? Is he going to, garner some kind of extra iconic status with the masses and move them in a certain direction? So there's that kind of conversation as well when you see these reactions, because like Man on the Street was like, this is our hero. He represents poor people who have been disenfranchised by the system. He's the free guy that we can now hold up and be elated about. And then there are others of us who are like, so what does this mean? How does he leverage this, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that he was released the day before Emancipation Day, did that kind of fuel the elation in any way? Like,
I think it added to it for sure. Because that was the talk on street. It's like, oh, can you imagine if he gets out on emancipation? Like, it's going to be his emancipation. It's going to be symbolic. Yeah, it was definitely feeding that.
Yeah. Walshy, are you seeing that elation? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah, definitely, man. For sure. Sure.
Yeah. And so like, okay, look, Dalton, I'm a bit conflicted on this, or not a bit is an understatement. I'm conflicted because we're celebrating the release based on a technicality, but there doesn't seem to be, a lot of consideration towards the graveness of the crime and maybe consideration for victims' families and stuff and how they're feeling when seeing people basically, parading in the streets and celebrating this release. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah. No, it's complex. It's contradictory. I mean, it's as silly as it sounds, I would argue that, in some music genres, when some of the big, megastars, the icons, get charged for a major crime and then do time in prison, sometimes their street credibility actually increases and their star, it feels like it shines brighter. Kartel's, his nickname is World Boss, and, so, the world, while the free World Boss merchandise, it's been selling out, for years, people have been wanting him to be freed. And people, so people are now celebrating, obviously, his prison release in the streets and in the clubs. But I also wonder, how the victims' families, the victims' friends, children feel about all of this, because at the end of the day, someone died a pretty gruesome death, right? This idea of the house burned down, the body hasn't been found. There was no proper burial of the victim, right? Because his body was disposed of, allegedly chopped up into minced meat and burned to ashes, So no one really thinks about the victims. And I'm guessing that they are probably being re-traumatized in the worst way possible, given that there are all of these Vybz Kartel celebrations happening worldwide, from Toronto to Jamaica to Miami to everywhere, right? So it's a very interesting time in dancehall and in culture in general.
Yeah, and I think Danae, it's probably like an interesting kind of conflict in the sense that some of us are prison abolitionists. Some of us believe in restorative justice versus carceral punishment. And so some of us seeing someone freed like this, it is a celebratory moment. Bonus if we love to jam to Summertime and Clark's, okay? But the thing is, at the same time, it wasn't necessarily a case there where justice is found for these victims. And if it was restorative justice, there's a sense of healing that is not kind of an aspect in play here. Does that complicate your feelings in terms of this conversation even further?
So me personally, I'm not complicated at all in terms of how I feel about this. However, I've chosen to speak on behalf of what I'm seeing in general. So what is happening, I think, in the Jamaican context is Vybz Kartel was away for 13 years. So there is a bit of maybe dissonance where people are like, he served a lot of time. So we don't want to discuss guilt or innocence. We don't want to discuss the technicality or non-technicality of it. He served 13 years. In general, we're good. You know what I mean? I think that has been the feeling, especially because of his iconic status, where people are just like, yeah. let's leave that stuff out of it. Let's not talk about technicalities or why this actually went how it went. Good on his lawyers, keen work on his lawyers' part. But nobody on the road wants to relitigate, and the Crown didn't want to relitigate because there's conversations about where was evidence and all of these things. So people have literally moved on from the conversation, and sadly for family members who have experienced the loss of Lizard and has unanswered questions, I'm sure this might be complex for them to watch and see, right? But that I think is playing out here, where people are just like, we're good, we got 13 years, Yeah,
it's complicated. People just want to take it easy. I get it.
Yeah.
I want to continue this conversation, but we do have to take a quick break. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. If you're joining us, we're talking about Vybz Kartel and his release from prison. Walshy fired, Dalton, Higgins, and Danae Peart are all here. Walshy, look, Vybz Kartel had some big names welcoming him back, right? We saw messages from Drake and Busta Rhymes and Nicki Minaj and Cardi B. Talk to me about the impact Vybz has had on the world stage, given that some of the biggest stars in the world are celebrating his release.
Yeah, the world loves dancehall. And that's a fact. The world loves dancehall. The world absolutely loves this rebellious music from this tiny rock in the middle of some water. They love it. And that's where it stops for the world. They're not thinking any deeper into this. And so same thing when a hip hop artist, goes through anything, people love hip hop. And I do believe that Vybz Kartel represented dancehall in a way that the world consumed dancehall. And, now the whole thing has changed. And so the world is still trying to figure out this, new way to consume the new dancehall. But when it came to original boop, boop, and, or always saying dancehall in a song, dancehall, I'm everything, and dancehall, and dancehall, and dancehall. He really waved that banner. And so a lot of people for sure, kind of, in my opinion, might have even stopped how much they love dancehall at Vybz Kartel's feet. And we're waiting for him to come out so that they could again say, yo, dancehall is back. And, we love dancehall and represent dancehall. And so, dancehall is always a good brand for any artist to associate themselves with, because again, it's very rebellious, it's very street, it's very edgy, and Vybz Kartel is right there representing all of that.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, when we talk about like how he represents dancehall, I mean, Dalton, talk to me about like, I mean, to the extent of his name being synonymous with dancehall, like in terms of his cultural influence. I mean, it is huge. I would go as far as saying it can be cultish, right? So talk to me about what makes him so relevant to the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Further to Walshy's point, I'd like to echo those sentiments. I mean, I think that when he left the game, dancehall I think it was a bit of a downward spiral, in my humble opinion. And I think other music genres from the African diaspora, Afro beats, for example, I think sort of took a bit of that fire, Now, Vybz Kartel, he's one of those rare dancehall artists whose influence extends far outside of the music industry, right? And the one glaring, example I can reference is the song Clarks. When he recorded the song, Clarks back in 2010, it's a song where he's, shamelessly celebrating these Clark shoes that were manufactured by this multinational company called Clarks. And it's a British company, it's been around since the 1800s. A lot of Jamaicans, people in the Caribbean, people around the world, even people outside of dancehall, punk rockers in the UK, they'd already adored these shoes, right? As these shoes, they kind of represent a certain style and take on upward mobility. The British shoes, Jamaica was obviously colonized by England, and they're really nice shoes. Like I own a pair of black leather shoes, like straight. And anyways, when he recorded the song and different, renditions of the song, right? I don't have exact numbers on this, but sales of the Clark shoes, they must have skyrocketed 100-fold. Okay. Everybody was talking about Clarks for what felt like about maybe between a 2 to 3 year period. And, to capitalize on the Clarks craze, Vybz Kartel released, more songs. There was Clarks and there was Clarks 2, another song called Clarks 2, Clarks again, another song called Clarks 3. Like and then now the downside to that explosion was that the prices for Clarks shoes in Jamaica, they increased considerably. So it became less accessible. And then, but, when we talk about the impacts, you look at another dancehall artist like Popcorn. Years later, you saw Popcorn, he's a protege of Vybz Kartel. He's all of a sudden doing these collaborations with Clarks, the company, and reworking their classic, original Wallabies boot, right? So outside of the music industry, when we talk about the worlds of fashion and popular culture, his influence extends way outside of the music industry.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's obviously that huge economic impact that we're talking about. So it's music, it's fashion, but also there is this, when we talk about his influence, there's this troubling decision he made where he bleaches his skin, which, I want you guys to listen to something. This is Vybz Kartel speaking at the University of the West Indies in 2011 about this situation.
Many people talk about Garveyism, black pride, etc. I have no problem with black pride. And I can assure you that my skin alteration has nothing to do with self-hate or opposition to blackness and Garveyism. I maintain that bleaching now doesn't mean the same as bleaching 25 years ago. Today, we are a much prouder race who know that we can do what we want as far as style is concerned. We dictate styles and regard them as just that.
So you heard Vybz Kartel there. Danae, talk to me about what this bleaching controversy, like what did that mean culturally? How did it impact the culture?
So I would say it propelled the bleaching phenomena in Jamaica. So, he, as an icon, saying boldly, cool like me wash my face with the cake soap and, making a whole song and video about that. And, he kept, being very comfortable in that context. I think it propelled it. I think in the dancehall circles, it certainly skyrocketed in numbers that we never anticipated. We saw both men and women bleaching. And so I think, speaking to, the last comments, he definitely has impact. And we saw it with the bleaching phenomena. And, he came out of prison still bleach. So, he definitely, he also at that time knew how to place things. So when he released that song, it was on the Blue Bomber rhythm. And so for those who are not Jamaicans, just so you know, Blue Bomber is a soap that we use to wash whites. And so he fully understands the intricacies of what he was doing there, and he will always hold that he's an entertainer, and what he's doing is just, you know, a part of reflecting society and a part of reflecting the times, and he ushered in, like I would say, a heightened sense of, you know, we can bleach, we can cool, like we wash our face with the face soap. Like he knew what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like, you know, to add on top of that, in terms of like him telling you who he is, I mean, you know, Walshy, look, Vybz makes music for everyone, I would say, right? He makes music you can make love to. He makes music that is spiritually uplifting. He makes music that is also raw and gritty, and you know, speaking to poverty and speaking to crime, but also boasting his gangster bravado. Should we just take Vybz Kartel as entertainment, or do we take him at face value here?
I definitely think every single artist is going to say they're an entertainer. Every single one of them in every single genre is going to say what I'm doing is, like she said, a reflection of society. What's going on? I'm hearing. I have my ear to the street. I'm hearing and seeing what's happening, and I'm really good at making a melody for what I'm seeing and hearing. And I think that that's something that is always going to be a bigger conversation, because all of us are grown people, you know, and so we have to look at what we want our children to listen to and what we want the next generation of people to listen to. And at the same time, we were those young people and that generation. And we never really probably took the lyrics past entertainment as young people. But we probably know some people that did. And so this kind of conversation, it will always be conflicting in how people answer it. I personally would say, yeah, man, entertainment, because when I was young, Bounty Killer run the place and Shabba run the place, and he must say certain things can't done, and Bounty I said, you know, all kind of song where, you know, I wouldn't repeat right here. I never took it past entertainment. I always was just entertained by these songs. But again, like I said, some other people, they did take it past entertainment. They did take it as a lifestyle that they should live, and literally how they should behave and what they should do and how they should act and how they should carry themselves. And so I will answer that question as entertainment, but I totally can see how somebody could answer that question differently.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, look, I mean, like Dalton, to add to that, I mean, Walshy was just talking about, like, you know, sort of the trajectory of dancehall and where we've always been in these places where Bounty Killer was there before. I mean, you know, you think about the music, you think about at one point King of the Dancehall, when you heard that, you thought of Beanie Man. You think about the fact that we're calling Vybz the King of the Dancehall while Sean Paul is still the global artist. I want to know what this conversation, what is the deeper conversation in this moment when it comes to dancehall and the trajectory of dancehall? Like, especially when you like, I mean, while she was also talking about the absence of Vybz and how that led. Now we have what, Skilly Bang, Skang. Talk to me about this trajectory. Where are we at now?
Well, for the record, you know, personally, I'm not a big supporter and fan of Vybz Kartel promoting skin bleaching, this idea of being closer to white is right. Nor do I necessarily support his songs that promote gratuitous violence. Okay. But what I will say is that Vybz Kartel is his artistic output is super high. He's insanely talented. And while he was in prison, he was releasing a ton of music, like literally dozens upon dozens of songs, big hit records. I mean, the guy even published a book while he was on lockdown, a book called The Voice of the Jamaican Ghetto. So I don't see him slowing down his musical output anytime soon. You know, he's like the textbook definition of prolific, right? And the guy's just too talented to slow down. But what I would also say is that dancehall has shifted a little bit. You know, he's been away for 10 years, and the music has changed. You know, the lyrics, I find they're a little bit more hardcore, or yardcore, as we would say, more aggressive. The beats are harder. There's a bit of UK grime influence happening. So he's in a battle. He has to now figure out how to stay relevant. Okay. You can't disappear from a scene for a decade and just seamlessly integrate yourself and have the younger dancehall listeners who are in their 20s and teenagers just sort of tap into your music like that, right? So that's going to take some time.
Okay, cool. I mean, listen, Walshy, you're a champion of dancehall, as part of Major Lazer and everything you're doing. Like, where do you see things going from here? Where does dancehall go from here?
Where does dancehall go from here? The eternal question, brother. If I had just a penny to place on the right answer, I would place it, but I don't, and I don't know. We're all ready to see. I mean, Vybz Kartel always says he's been a champion of dancehall, even when he, isn't around. His songs were still coming out and still doing very well. And he's covered every single topic you can think of in dancehall. And then all of a sudden he drops a new topic that you never thought could be talked about in dancehall. He's even had songs that are anti-bleaching songs. If you guys go check out a song we might have called With a Bleaching Fuck, so it's really funny to hear us talk about things like his lyrics. And then when we go through his catalog, we see songs that are actually, positive songs and loving songs and, songs that are against a lot of things. Those songs usually don't get the highlight, but, he has that range in his catalog. And so I am hoping that he chooses those songs a lot more than the songs that promote things that I also don't want to hear or like to see, such as the skin bleaching and things like that. But Vybz Kartel is Vybz Kartel. He understands the streets like no one else. And so we will see what he does. And I'm sure, are all anticipating great music coming from Vybz Kartel.
Yeah, so beautifully put. Danae, last word to you. I mean, so Vybz Kartel, he's out now after serving 13 years. Do you expect this to be a reset for Vybz Kartel?
So my answer to that is potentially, right? Like, he has been given a gift, whether or not he is fully aware. Like, he talks about time a lot in his interviews now, post release. And so he's been given a gift. The gift is you now have a window of opportunity where your iconic status has mushroomed. And so you have a window of opportunity here to do something like phenomenal in the culture. You have a window of opportunity to go back to some of the things we appreciated with Vybz Kartel, where he was Mr. Brand. He had drink, he had condom. Like, now everybody's wearing these orange handkerchiefs and stuff. Like, he has the potential to do product upon product. He also he's never really slowed in terms of his popularity while being locked up. So he had, 500,000 streams a day. And, he's now in the billions for total stream and counting, right? So, that's why the celebs are clamoring for him. And so because he represents popularity, he represents the numbers, and he now has, he's in a sweet spot with this level of popularity that he could play up on and he could utilize. However, Vybz is also slipping into some old ways when we hear him talking in these interviews. The badmanism, the world bossism, all of those things that, could be a distraction, could take him down a different path. So it's potentially is my answer.
Okay. So complicated. But listen, I feel like we've been through so much together, y'all. I am going to remember this conversation. So thank you so much for being here with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right.
Danae Peart is a culture critic based in Toronto. Dalton Higgins is a publicist, author, and veteran music journalist. He's in Washington, D.C. And Walshy Fire is a DJ and record producer, but you also know him from Major Lazer. He's in Miami. And that's it for the podcast today. While you're listening to this, don't forget to give us a follow. You can also connect with us on Instagram. We're at Commotion CBC. I'm Rad Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. Elamine is back in this chair on Monday, and honestly, I had such a blast doing this with y'all. Until next time.